With college basketball season underway, find out who stood out, who shined, and who looked good in the opinion of Sam Ferris, aka Mr. Draft Dummies. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of today. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs. It helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to, and it helps you talk to them or get in touch with them faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. What is up? I'm Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board and the host of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. I'm also the founder of NBA Draft Junkies, and my co-host for today is Sam Ferris, aka Mr. Draft Dummies, but he's no dummy. Sam, opening night was a couple days ago. There are over 200 games. It's impossible to watch all of them. And I know you mentioned off air that you had a chance to watch about 4 or 5 games. And I want to get your opinion on who stood out, like which guy. It doesn't have to be the best draft pick or highest rated player, but which guy to you had the most impressive start to their season?
So we were talking about this before we got on air, and I didn't tell you who I wanted to talk about, but you kind of read my mind, so I thought that was pretty cool. A few guys you mentioned that I wanted to hit on, and we can start, if you want, with Ricky Council of Arkansas. I saw you post a clip or two of him today, and he's one of my favorite players in this class. He's coming into this year one of the guys I was highest on compared to consensus or where you might see in the mainstream. I had him ranked as one of my top 5 returning prospects, and a lot of people
Oh,
didn't even know like who
who
he
he
was.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, coming into the year. A guy that I liked at Wichita State a lot. I went so far as to say, because a lot of people like a lot of the freshmen for Arkansas, I went so far as to say that I thought he had a very good chance to be Arkansas's second best player behind Nick Smith this year. And Nick Smith didn't play due to an injury that he picked up before the game. And so Ricky Council to me looked like Arkansas's best player in the game, but it wasn't just that. Like the flashes that he put out in one game, like that highlight reel was pretty ridiculous. The finishes that he had around the rim, contorting his body double clutch. You posted a sick reverse dunk in traffic. I mean, that was spectacular even for what I was expecting. So a very good start to the year for him.
That dunk was so impressive to me. And if you are listening to the podcast, even if you're on YouTube, if you go to my Twitter, Barlow 500, which I guess you can see on the graphic on YouTube, I posted it. And it was like, it's something that you can go a whole basketball season without seeing somebody dunk backwards in a half court set and without a load up. It was like, so I can't even describe it. He was driving to his left. He got a step on the man, and instead of having the left hand finish on the left side of the rim, he just dunked it backwards. And what's crazy is, so I went back and rewatched his film from Wichita State, and he did it last year too. So I'm like, all right, I need to watch more film and see if that's like his go-to when he's going left instead of finishing with his left hand. I mean, and the one clip that I saw, he actually missed it, but he tried it. And yeah, I mean, like I said, you can go a whole season without seeing somebody get dunked on backwards one-on-one in a half court. And usually
Yeah.
when you have like these highlight dunks, somebody had a launching pad and the center was right under the rim. You rarely see a guy going stride for stride with his hand and he gets dunked on backwards. But
Yeah.
yeah, man, I like his game. I've always kind of been a little biased towards crafty shot makers and guys that just can go out and get a bucket, guys that have like an advanced handle and a real dancy with the ball. I mean, I'm a James Harden fan. I'm a Luka fan. Of course, sometimes they get a little too isolation heavy, but I like those guys. I mean, they're fun to watch, and sometimes it's kind of hard to see how that translates to the NBA. So my next question for you is, where do you have him as a draft prospect?
Yeah, so I had him as a first rounder coming in. Like I said, I had him as a top five returning prospect, and obviously there will be more than five returning players to college basketball picked in the first round. So I view him as that because he's a really, really good athlete in terms of speed, quickness, jumping ability. 6'5" or 6'6", depending on where you look. And some of the statistical work that I kind of do, I really that my analytical stuff liked him. Uh, a low turnover guy in his role at Wichita State, and had a really good BPM there as well. So a couple things that popped for me looking at him analytically. So I've followed him for a while. But like you said, for a guy that's that athletic and he's 6'5", 6'6", so he's legit two size, maybe even can guard some wings in the NBA. His handle is really good, actually. Can handle it with both hands, has advanced moves, crossovers, and then the finishing, like we said, is kind of the best attribute for him. Like a lot of guys, though, it's going to come down to the jumper where it's been a mixed bag. He's made shots throughout his career in college, but the set shot or like the catch and shoot from three is not smooth for him. Like if you
Hitch.
watch him and
Yeah.
it's a hitch, he'll get like side spin on it sometimes and like it's not a clean release. So if you were to guarantee me that he ends up shooting, then he's clearly a top 20 guy for me, but there's certainly some work to be done on the jumper. I just like so much of the rest of his game.
Yeah, I like him too. I really like him. I like the size. I mean, he has the broad shoulders. He's a good athlete. He's a creative scorer.
Mm-hmm.
My concerns are one, the hitch in the shot,
Yeah.
and he only shot like 30% on catch and shoot jumpers last year. But the biggest concern for me is he is a guy that's a scorer. Like that's who he is. And when I look at guys that I project to be scorers, I feel like in today's NBA, unless you're like a Cam Thomas, which is like a rare situation. I mean, even then you see that he's a guy that can be out the rotation because it's kind of like a preference or whatever. But I think like at least for me, if you're gonna be like a big time scorer in the NBA or even just a guy that relies on scoring, I think you have to be a creator as far as creating for others. And the two things that I want to see out of him this season is one, improve the catch and shoot numbers and improve his assist to turnover ratio. Even though he wasn't like a high turnover guy, it was a negative assist to turnover ratio. And I think that if he's like a guy that can make you pay for, and he's not a bad passer. I think he's a good ball mover, but if he can become a more of a creator, which I don't even know if he really have the opportunity this year, then I think that I mean that will go a long way in helping his draft status.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a step above the pure scorer types, like a Cam Thomas or whatever, as a passer. And then defensively, I like him. He's put up steals and blocks in college, like career 2% block and steal rate, which are good. And just he has vertical pop and can really move, and he's strong at 6'6". So the tools are there. It's just, and I think this year Arkansas, he's certainly gonna like play defense for this team. And what happens with Arkansas is they tend to go end up down the stretch playing 6 or 7 guys, and he played like almost the whole game the other day. So I think he's going to be a guy that's playing a ton of minutes for a high profile team. People are going to get to see him and realize how talented he is. Just going to come down to the jumper as well as the other things you mentioned.
Is there such thing as having too much talent? Because if Arkansas just had their three highly touted freshmen and some role players around them, they'd be one of the best teams. But you throw in Council and Trayvon Brazile,
Yeah.
that's a lot of talent and a lot of mouths to feed. What are your thoughts on their overall talent?
Well, we talked about Anthony Black last time, and so he makes it a little easier in that he's not a guy that really looks to score himself. So I think he's fine taking that back seat, facilitating. He's just not a guy that I see really shooting or scoring that often, and that's not really his personality on the court either. So I think he'll help there. He's kind of more that connector, that Lonzo Ball, Dyson Daniels type, like we talked about, I think, last week. And then Jordan Walsh to me is kind of more of a spot up scorer. He can score off one or two dribbles. He's an athlete around the rim, but not a guy that's going to be dribbling the air out of the ball and like creating his own. And the other thing with him is watching him before college as well. He fouls a ton. He cannot stop fouling. I think he was in foul trouble. So we'll see how much he plays. He's not a guy that I view as like a guaranteed one and done, like I think some people do. And again, I just don't know how much opportunity, like you said, he's going to get to show his own game. So he's kind of like the third, fourth, fifth option for this team. And so I think a lot of people penciled him in to be a one and done. And I don't think that's a guaranteed thing.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it in the next segment. I want to get your thoughts on the one and dones. And but yeah, we'll save that for the next segment because I want to talk to everyone about LinkedIn jobs. That's because these days, every new hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you have to do is add your job with the hashtag hiring to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you like to interview and, more importantly, who you'd like to hire. And that's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs, it helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to, and it helps you find them faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free, and terms and conditions apply. Thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. That is Locked On Sports Today. It is available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. I am Rafael Barlowe with my co-host Sam Ferris. And when we left off, we talked about Jordan Walsh. And you said that, or you hinted that you think he could be a 2-year guy. And I think we talked about this on previous podcasts, especially with NIL and coming back. I think it's more beneficial for guys to come back if they're not a lock to be a first rounder. And if you look at some of the guys from from this year's draft, 2022 draft, guys that left, I'm thinking, you know what, they have to be regretting it. They have to. The first guy that comes to mind is J.D. Davison. Would you rather be playing in the SEC at Alabama, probably a decent NIL deal? And I don't know what they're getting at Alabama, but I have heard some of these deals, some of these guys are getting at these Power 5 schools. Or do you want to be playing for the Maine Red Claws in front of, 800 people a night?
Yeah.
And so, I wonder, is this the year that we're going to see guys are like, okay, I don't know if I'm going in the top 30. Are we going to see more Terquavion Smiths, even though he was going to go first round, in my opinion? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. And what I think is kind of interesting, because I would add, you mentioned Davison and Kendall Brown, I would throw in there. Even Bryce McGowan's would be another one that
and he only got
like
a two-way. He only got a two-way. He didn't even get a standard contract.
Yeah, and I like all those guys. I think they would have all probably gone in the first round had they come back. But you hear the phrase where a lot of guys say, I want to bet on myself and go to the next level. Well, if you're going to bet on yourself, in my view, bet on yourself by coming back to college and proving that you're a first round pick. It's just the easier path, because if you are good enough, then you'll show it your second year in college. You'll make more money by becoming a top 20 pick in the NBA. But guys that get picked in the second round, I like to say that it gets late early. If you don't prove anything in, I don't know, your first 18 months, they're just not that invested in a guy that they're picking 45th in the NBA draft. And so it's tough. You might go to a team where you don't even get any opportunity. And so that's kind of what I like to say. If you really want to prove yourself, do the the Johnny Davis, do the Keegan Murray, do the Terquavion Smith, come back and prove it in college. It makes your path easier. You'll get paid for the NIL deal in college. So I don't think the money there will differ too much. But then when you get picked in the first round in the top 20, have that guaranteed contract, then you're locked into NBA money longer term. So I agree. That's what I would advise more kids to do. Like, if you want to bet on yourself, come back and prove it.
Yeah, I had tweeted like right after all the games on Monday, and I'm looking at the box scores. I'm like, okay, this transfer portal is going to go crazy in the next few weeks because there were so many guys that I saw on draft boards that played 3 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, or they're not starting. And there's so much pressure on guys to get in and out that I don't even know if some of the players are really even enjoying college basketball because they put so much pressure on themselves, or people around them have put pressure to where you feel like if you don't leave after your freshman year, it wasn't a success. Or if you're not getting certain minutes as a top 50 prospect, then that means you need to go transfer schools. But I want to transition that to the guy that I think is going to be the youngest prospect in the 2023 draft. And it's somebody that I'm really, really high on.
Yeah.
GG Jackson. What did you think of his debut?
Yeah, he was probably the guy I was most excited to see, just to see how he looked in game one. The kind of sucky thing about the beginning of the schedule early on is there haven't been any high profile matchups, so it's kind of more just checking out individual players. And what excited me the most about him is they played him on the perimeter. They let him handle the ball some. He didn't play as just kind of a plodding five in the middle. And so that was good to see. I thought he made good decisions. I thought he moved the ball. He had just a little more kind of perimeter game and like wiggle than I guess I expected. Or I thought he would kind of play just in the post as like a post big in college. That's what I was kind of worried about. So I'm excited to see him develop that perimeter skill this year. I thought it looked good in game one, albeit against SC State, not a great opponent. I liked also at the end of the game, they went zone defense against South Carolina, and I thought GG Jackson made good passing reads. Not difficult reads, but he moved the ball quickly and made the right decision. And so that was good to see as well. So, all in all, of course, he put up good numbers, a double double, I think. Just looked good all around. So, a very promising debut for him.
Yeah, I'm really high on him. And I'm not surprised by how they're using him. I figure, a high profile recruit going to South Carolina, part of the reason he went there is because he felt like they were going to give him the keys. I spoke to a NBA scout last week, maybe it was the week before, and he had mentioned that when he first saw GG Jackson play or watched his film, he was a rim roller, a shot blocker, was just like a high upside raw athlete that he thought was going to be in the 2024 draft. And then he said he ended up watching film 3 months later. He's shooting threes, he's picking and popping, he's handling the ball, and he's like, either he already had that in him or he developed that and got really good in a really short amount of time. So he was high on him. The only concern that I've heard from NBA scouts about GG is he's just so young, and they're like, he's only going to be 18 on draft day. And it's almost like he skipped, and even though he did go to college, but he skipped a year of high school. And so they just wonder, like, man, an 18-year-old, he goes to a team where, it just could be difficult for him. But, 1 year, it's weird to hear people say that 1 year makes that big of a difference. But obviously the NBA thought so. That's why they got rid of letting guys come out of high school, unless you're Shaden Sharp, unless you can find like a loophole in the system. All right. Bet Online is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and the trends for every professional and amateur league out there. They even got the amateurs. From football to basketball to soccer, even esports, everything is at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those too at Bet Online as well. We are the fastest and the easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, it is where the game starts. All right, last segment. I had a couple guys that I wanted to squeeze in this segment to ask Sam about. And the next guy that I want to talk to you about and get your thoughts on, Coleman Hawkins. Where did you have him on your big board, and were you surprised by his performance, or do you think it is going to be a like basically a preview of how you expect the season to go?
Yeah, another guy that I was excited to talk about that I liked this offseason because, well, a few reasons. Number one, the situation's going to be a lot better for him this year. I mean, at least for me, in terms of the enjoyment watching, Kofi Coburn was a really good college player, but I don't really love watching those teams that revolve around just a center that plays in the paint. So I think they're going to be more fun to watch this year, kind of more NBA like with Hawkins, with Shannon and Meyer on the wing. And Hawkins to me is kind of like the prototypical modern NBA four because he's like 6'10". He can dribble it pretty well. He can pass, but the jumper too is what is intriguing about him. And he got up a bunch of threes and made them in this game. What really stands out is his jumper. The release is really quick too. So I think he's going to be able to get up a lot of volume. He's a guy that defenses will have to respect, especially as that continues to progress and improve. So again, just at 6'10", he is the modern four with the handling, the passing, and the shooting. Just a heady player too. And I think Illinois is going to be good this year. The situation is going to be more beneficial for them. They'll be more fun to watch. And I think they're going to be like a top 15 team in college basketball this year.
Yeah, he had a great debut. I think he only shot like 29% from three last year if you just look at the numbers.
Yeah.
But when you watch the film, it does not show you a 29% shooter, if that makes sense. Or you can look at it and say, well, I looked at the film and he was missing 70% of his threes. But you can look at it and say, like, all right, the stroke looks projectable, and I think that he's going to be a better shooter. What do you think he'll need to do to put himself in the conversation as like a late first rounder? Do you think
Yeah.
it's a percentage on the three ball?
Yeah, I think it is. And what's funny about small sample shooting sizes is if you just add this first game he had of this season onto his numbers from last year, he already goes all the way up from 29 to 33%, and that like looks a lot better on paper, just one
Yes.
game. So that it'll fluctuate a lot, but I think he's going to shoot it better this year with the spacing that they have, and he just feels more empowered to shoot. He's more integral player this year, and he's just a little bit older. So I love the size and the passing and the shooting at that spot. I had him as a second round guy, but a guy that I had kind of a star next to as I like his fit in the modern NBA. If he plays like I think he can sneak into the end of the first round this year. And based on what he showed in game one, I think he can do that. I think it is, people do read into the shooting numbers, so I think he's going to have to shoot probably in the high 30s from three to get kind of that recognition. And I think it'll help if Illinois is a good team and he's just a top 3 or 4 guy for them this year, which I do think is going to happen.
Makes sense. All right. Earlier in the show, you talked about um, your top returning players. So one of my top returning players, I would say he's probably my third best. Maybe I go back and forth between my second. I had third best returning player after Quavion number one,
Me
and I
too.
go back and forth between Arthur Kaluma and Marcus Sasser. What did you think of Marcus Sasser in his first game?
Looked really good right where he left off. Houston's my national championship pick this year, and they missed his shooting. They missed him last year when he missed a ton of time. Just a classic college guard, 4-year guy, 6'1", especially classic Houston guard. Tons of steals. He's a little undersized at 6'1", 6'2", but elite handle, can create his own shot, but also small sample last year, but he shot 52% on spot ups as well, and shoots a really nice floater, has good touch. Like, to me, he's probably the best guard, I would say, in college basketball, just in terms of college basketball guard. I also, like you said, I also have Terquavion as my number one returner, and he certainly looked the part. But if I'm picking a guy to lead my college basketball team, it might be Sasser, and he's kind of proven why. So he's the missing ingredient coming back. I think Houston, to me, is my national championship pick. What do you think he has to show then? You're high on him. So do you view him as a potential starting point guard, or is he just a really high-end backup combo guard, in your opinion?
I think he's a microwave scorer. I think my best fit for him would be like this Ben Gordon role, where he comes off the bench and he just does what he does, right? He leads your second unit. Man, I would like to see him on a team like Denver. You know, you play with Denver and you got Jokic. And I mean, they already have Bones Highland, so it may not be like the best fit or best direct path to playing time, but a situation where he doesn't have to be the primary ball handler, which I don't think nobody would make him their primary anyway, but you just have like, you know, an oversized playmaker, whether it's Jokic, whether it's Giannis, maybe even like Harden, maybe even like Luka, to where he doesn't have to be the ball handler. He can be your secondary, but his main thing is to complement those guys, knock down open shots. And then he could be a guy that, you know, at the end of the shot clock, when they're doubling and the star has to give the ball to somebody else to make a play, he would be that guy. So that's what I would see him as.
Yeah. And also what I like about him is he can defend more. Like most of those microwave guys you think of are kind of sieves defensively, like Jordan Poole, for example, and Bones Highland have both kind of been that kind of player. But he's kind of 6'2", but I think he has a longer wingspan, like 6'7", put up a lot of steals in college, a tough guy. Of course, if you're playing for Houston, you got to play physical and tough. So he can guard up a little bit. So I think that kind of gives him an edge there if you're comparing him to guys like that. I think he's better defensively than your average microwave scorer in the NBA.
And he's stronger than those guys that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And so I think that would help him on the defensive end. I mean, strong lower body. He's older, so I mean, the maturity helps as far as like him being experienced and having 4 years of weightlifting on a college program, and then the toughness. So I like him. I would even take him in the first round.
Yeah. No, if you like him, you think he can come in and play, like we said, he's better defensively. He's ready to contribute right away. I personally, the way I look at it is if I'm taking a shot on a guy in the top 10 or the lottery, I like the younger prospects. Like I was out on Davion Mitchell, those type of guys as a top 10 pick. But if we're talking later in the first or in the second round, I like to find the guys that can contribute right away, that because you need those guys that you're picking late in the first round. Those are usually playoff teams that need contributors. Like they don't have time for development projects. And so I like him as, you know, early second, late first round pick, like the defense combined with the shooting and the scoring upside.
Yeah, a team like the Lakers could use him right now, today.
Lakers could use a lot of players, right?
They could use a lot of players. But, you know, this class isn't deep on shooters. So I think they specifically need, I know they specifically need some shooting, and he could definitely come in and help. But, man, as always, it was a pleasure sharing the show with you and getting your thoughts and insights. And thank you, the listener, for making this podcast your first listen of the day. Now, for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It is available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. I am Rafael Barlowe, and Sam, Mr. Draft Dummies himself, dropped some knowledge on you guys today, and we're out.